also then there will be a time for general discussion from, I almost said congregation, the audience. So, if you don't mind, first up, and David, I'm really here to learn.
Ah, wonderful, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. And we have a plan, which is news to me, Susan.
News to me too, that's it.
Anyway, in preparing a little bit for this, I made some notes this morning and called Susan and said, how does this sound? Is this what we're trying to do? And so this is what, what I thought would be a good way to start. The ACLU has a position paper, a number of position papers on same-sex marriage. We somewhat avoid the terminology of gay marriage and use same-sex marriage as the substitute. And let me read the premise that we have. The ACLU position on same-sex marriage is grounded in the constitutional guarantee of equality and fairness. That's it. That's, put a big period there. There's nothing more. The reason for it is that anything else that you call a same-sex union leaves out the fairness and equality factor. And we'll expand upon that a little bit later. But I wanted to start out with that's the premise that the ACLU has, the constitutional guarantee of equality and fairness. And it's that simple. You don't need to elaborate any further than that. But let me go on a little bit with what's in our position paper. The ACLU believes that the only way to guarantee full and equal treatment for same-sex couples is to enact laws granting lesbian and gay couples the ability and right to marry. So that's kind of the next step that we take. The third point I want to make here in these 5 minutes, which I think I'll end early, is that we endorse the position of the New Jersey Supreme Court, and we just got a copy of the brief that was sent around. But the Chief Justice Deborah Ports wrote these words in the minority paper. And unless you all know, I suspect, that the court upheld the right for same-sex marriage in the state of New Jersey, sent it to the legislature. My understanding is for the legislature to determine exactly what that name shall be. And apparently, in the next 180 days since the decision, the legislature is going to have to come up with a term, be it marriage, be it civil unions, be it domestic partnerships, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever it's called, the legislature is going to have to determine that. Interestingly enough, 58%, according to the polls, and there was a poll done just a week ago in New Jersey, 58% of the residents or the citizens of New Jersey favor full marriage. Only 28% are opposed. Now, that didn't happen magically. That those numbers are so favorable to same-sex marriage. It happened because there were a lot of public meetings, there was a lot of education going on. There has been just a very concerted effort by the people of the community in New Jersey to make people aware of what's involved, and we'll discuss that a little bit more. But getting back to the decision that was written by Chief Justice Deborah Ports in New Jersey, she said, "We do not underestimate the power of language. Labels set people apart as surely as physical separation on a bus or in a school facility. Labels are used to perpetuate prejudices about differences. By excluding same-sex couples from civil marriage, the state declares that it is legitimate to differentiate between same-sex couples' commitments and the commitments of heterosexual couples. Ultimately, the message is that what same-sex couples have is not as important or as significant as real heterosexual marriages, that such lesser relationships cannot have the same meaning of marriage." And that's the end of her quote. But essentially what she's saying there is that if you call the unions of same-sex couples anything other than marriage, you are stigmatizing and placing those individuals into a separate category and into a second-class category. So there can be no other objective in the mind of the ACLU, and we have certainly been involved in this battle a great deal, except for full and equal marriage. Okay, so that's kind of the basis of where the ACLU is coming from. And what I did after doing that was I thought about what else should we talk about in terms of this whole question of same-sex marriage. And here are some questions that I hope that we can discuss together tonight in a very informal way and see if we can come up with some answers and maybe a consensus, in terms of these questions. The first one is, why do same-sex couples wish to marry? And I have a whole long paragraph as to reasons. I'll very quickly finish up the questions. Should gays and lesbians settle for civil unions and give up the fight for marriage? Second question. And I think that that's something we really need to talk about. Would churches, synagogues, or mosques be required to perform marriages of same-sex couples? Third question. What part of our society has most strongly opposed same-sex marriage? And Susan's short answer is the usual suspects. Next question. How do Americans feel about same-sex marriage? What are the polls saying? Next, should we view civil unions as a stepping stone to full marriage rights? And the next is, what's next? What's next from the legislatures? What's next from the courts? And there are at least 5 states that have court decisions pending. So there's a lot that's going to be happening. And next, what have we done well? And where do we go from here? And I guess that last question is I'm getting to what action steps? Where do we need to focus our attention?
Thank you, David. Yes. The second person, and Dave, you'll have the opportunity later to amplify or whatever. But, Caillean?
In the 18th century, 2 Irish women took off to Wales and set up housekeeping. They were wealthy, they were propertied, they entertained publicly, they were a literary centre, and they were scandal. Huge surprise. In the 1920s in Paris, women created an entire community in the left bank. Couples, long-term, spent their lives together. Interestingly, history doesn't mention what happened to their property when one or the other one died. Except somehow they always ended up moving. Curious thing. Women have problems with property anyways. No matter how you slice it, we do not have the leverage and influence in the legal community, in society, and in opinion that we would if we were now. The issue of same-sex marriage, particularly for women, is unique in some respects in terms of its need for protection. There have always been same-sex couples, women joining together out of love, out of necessity, whatever, to sustain themselves. And yet, its lack of recognition, people's lack of perception of the depth of the commitment, tends to trivialize it. We talk about Gertrude Stein's secretary, Alice B. Toklas. She's her lover. We talk about Natalie Barney's good friend, Romaine Brooks, her lover.